On June 14th, 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte, first consul of France, faced complete defeat at the Battle of Marengo when 30,000 Austrian troops surprised his scattered forces. By mid-afternoon, his army was in full retreat and victory seemed impossible, but within hours, one of history's most dramatic battlefield reversals would cement Napoleon's legend and change the fate of Europe. Here's what it was really like to experience Napoleon's greatest comeback. Before we start, if these stories help you sleep, hitting subscribe would be amazing. And I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop your location and time in the comments. Sometimes I see someone from Tokyo commenting at what's like 3 a.m. my time. Okay, tonight we're heading back to the Napoleonic Wars. But before we go anywhere, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second, adjust your pillows, fix that blanket. Where we're going, you're definitely going to want to be settled in. Your eyes flutter open to a damp grey dawn in northern Italy. The first thing that hits you is the soreness. Every muscle in your body aches like you've been trampled by horses. You're not in your cosy bed with its memory foam and clean sheets. No, you're sprawled on hard-packed earth with only a thin, scratchy wool blanket between you and the ground. The June morning should be warm, but there's a chill that seeps right into your bones from the rain-soaked soil beneath you. Around you, thousands of French soldiers are stirring in the pre-dawn light. The smell is, let's just say, an army of men who haven't bathed in weeks creates its own special aroma. Sweat, leather, gunpowder, and something else, that underlying tension that comes before battle. Up. Get up. Citizen. The Austrians are moving. The shout jolts you fully awake. The year is 1800, and you're a soldier in Napoleon Bonaparte's army of reserve. And this day, June 14th, will become one of the most legendary in military history, though right now it just feels like another miserable morning in a foreign country where people keep trying to kill you. You scramble to your feet, grabbing your musket. Your stomach growls painfully. Dinner last night was a half ration of mouldy bread that you had to choke down with some questionable water. The supply wagons are somewhere far behind the army, and foraging parties haven't brought back much. Napoleon's bold strategy of crossing the Alps has gotten you behind enemy lines, but it's also gotten you pretty damn hungry. "They're saying the Austrians are attacking from Alessandria," mutters the soldier next to you, a grizzled veteran named Marcel with a magnificent moustache and a missing front tooth. But that can't be right. The first consul said they'd be retreating. That's the thing about Napoleon Bonaparte. He's a military genius, sure, but even geniuses make mistakes, and this morning he's made a big one. See, Napoleon's convinced that the Austrian army under General Michael von Mehlers is trying to escape east, so he's spread his forces out across miles of countryside to catch them. You and about 15,000 other French troops are around the village of Marengo, while another 10,000 are scattered elsewhere. It's a smart plan if the enemy is actually retreating, but they're not. As the morning fog lifts, an unmistakable sound rolls across the plains like distant thunder, cannon fire, a lot of it. "Holy shit," Marcel whispers, his face going pale beneath his weathered tan. "That's a full attack." Within minutes, officers are shouting orders, drummers are beating assembly, and your regiment is forming up. Through gaps in the morning mist, you catch glimpses of the Austrian army emerging from Alessandria, not retreating at all, but advancing in full force, 30,000 men with over 100 cannons against your scattered 15,000 with barely a dozen guns. Wait. This can't be right. Napoleon is supposed to be the one surprising enemies, not the other way around. But here you are. "The first consul was wrong," someone says nearby. "We're completely outnumbered." And just like that, you're marching forward into what might be the last day of your life. See, Napoleon Bonaparte's not actually with you. That's another problem. He's miles away at his headquarters, convinced the Austrians are retreating, not attacking. By the time messengers reach him with news of the assault, precious hours will be lost. The initial Austrian attack hits like a hammer. Their artillery opens up and the sound is deafening, not just the boom of the cannons, but the whistling shriek of round shot tearing through the air, followed by the sickening thud when it finds its target. You watch in horror as a cannonball rips through your formation, taking 3 men with it in a spray of red. Your regiment forms up along a small stream called the Fontenone. It's not much of a defensive position, just a narrow waterway with steep banks, but it's all you've got. The orders are simple. Hold this line at all costs. The Austrians come in waves, their white uniforms standing out against the green fields. Their first assault hits the French centre, where General Victor's division is positioned. Your own regiment is part of General Lanz's division, off to the right flank. "All steady," your captain shouts. "Wait for the order." The first Austrian attack is repulsed. Men cheer around you. Maybe this won't be so bad after all, but then you look west and your heart sinks. More Austrian columns are forming up, a lot more. "I've been in 12 battles, Marcel says, calmly reloading his musket, "and I've never seen odds this bad." "Then why are you so calm?" you ask, your own hands shaking as you try to reload. He shrugs. "If today's my day, it's my day. Besides, I've seen the little corporal pull off miracles before." The little corporal, that's what veterans like Marcel call Napoleon, a nickname from his early days as a young artillery officer. But right now, the little corporal is nowhere to be seen and his soldiers are in serious trouble. The second Austrian attack is stronger than the first. They've brought up more artillery, and the French line along the Fontenone is being pounded mercilessly. The air fills with smoke so thick you can barely see 20 paces ahead. The roar of gunfire becomes continuous, not individual shots, but a rolling thunder of muskets and cannon. Time loses meaning in battle. Minutes stretch like hours. Hours compress into moments. The fighting along the Fontenone continues throughout the morning, attack after attack. The stream's water runs red in places. The bodies pile up on both banks. By noon, the situation is dire. The Austrians have found a gap north of your position and are threatening to outflank the entire French line. General Victor's division in the centre is running dangerously low on ammunition. Some units have completely run out, reduced to using their muskets as clubs or throwing stones. Then the worst happens. The Austrian weight of numbers finally tells. Their 30,000 men and 100 guns against the French, 16,000 men and 15 guns is simply too much. First one French regiment breaks, then another. The retreat begins, and once it starts, it's hard to stop. Your captain shouts for an orderly withdrawal, but there's nothing orderly about what follows. The French line collapses, and suddenly you're running eastward across those same fields you defended all morning. Austrian cavalry appears, charging into the retreating French infantry. Men who stop to make a stand are cut down. "Stay together," Marcel shouts over the chaos. "If we scatter, we're dead." Your regiment manages to maintain some cohesion as it falls back, fighting a desperate rearguard action. But all around you, the French army is disintegrating. By 3 in the afternoon, the battle seems utterly lost. The French have been driven back almost a mile from their original positions, leaving behind their dead, their wounded, and most of their artillery. This is what defeat looks like. Complete catastrophic defeat. And somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, a messenger finally reaches Napoleon Bonaparte with the news that his army is fighting for its life. The story goes that when Napoleon heard the distant sound of cannon fire that morning, he dismissed it. Just a reconnaissance in force, he supposedly said. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, first consul of France and arguably the greatest military mind of his generation, could make a colossal misjudgment. By the time he realizes his error and races toward the battlefield, the situation appears hopeless. The French army that had marched triumphantly over the Alps is now streaming eastward in retreat, pursued by victorious Austrians. You're exhausted, parched and terrified as you stumble across the plains east of Marengo. Your unit has been reduced to perhaps half its original strength. Marcel is still with you, blood streaming from a minor wound on his forehead but otherwise intact. "This is it," someone nearby says. "The campaign is over. We'll be lucky to make it back to France alive." The retreat continues throughout the early afternoon. The Austrian pursuit, thankfully, isn't particularly aggressive. General Melas, the 70-year-old Austrian commander, believes he's won a decisive victory. So confident is he in his triumph that he returns to Alessandria to write his victory dispatch, leaving his chief of staff, General Zach, to handle the pursuit. It's a decision that will go down as one of the worst in military history. Around 5 o'clock, as your shattered regiment reaches the village of San Giuliano, something unexpected happens. Fresh troops appear on the road, French troops, marching westward toward the sound of battle, not away from it. "Who are they?" you ask, staring in disbelief. Marcel squints, then breaks into a gap-toothed grin. "That's Desai's division, they've come back." General Louis Desai had been detached from the main army with his division of 5,000 men to block what Napoleon thought would be the Austrian escape route. When Desai heard the distant sound of battle, he turned his division around and marched to the sound of the guns, a soldier's most sacred duty. Now, as the sun begins its westward descent, Desai's fresh troops are arriving on the battlefield, and with them is Napoleon himself, rallying the retreating soldiers. "I've gone far enough for today," Napoleon announces to his men. "It is my habit to sleep on the field of battle. The effect on morale is electric. Retreating soldiers stop in their tracks. Scattered units reform. Napoleon, the master psychologist as well as the master strategist, knows exactly what his demoralized army needs to hear." Wait, am I making this up? Did he actually say that? Look, Napoleon was basically a walking quote machine. Half the things attributed to him were probably made up later, but it makes for a damn good story, right? Desai reportedly tells Napoleon, "This battle is completely lost." But it's only 3 o'clock. There is still time to win another. And that's exactly what they set out to do. Napoleon quickly develops a new plan. While the remnants of his battered army reform their lines, Desai's fresh division will prepare a counterattack. General Marmont gathers all available artillery, just 18 guns, and positions them to blast the advancing Austrians. Meanwhile, General Kellerman's heavy cavalry, which has remained relatively intact, is held in reserve for the decisive moment. The Austrians, believing they're simply mopping up a defeated enemy, advance in a long column along the main road, their guard down. It's General Zach leading the Austrian advance guard of Grenadiers elite troops, but moving forward with the casual confidence of men who think the fighting is over. They have no idea what's about to hit them. At about 5:30, Desai's division strikes. The 9th Light Regiment leads the attack, pouring heavy fire into the surprised Austrians. For a moment, the Austrians waver, but then begin to form up to meet this unexpected threat. It's at this critical moment that tragedy strikes. General Desai, leading from the front as always, is shot through the heart and dies instantly. His last words, according to legend, tell the first consul that I die regretting that I have not done enough to live in posterity. Again, with the suspiciously perfect last words. I mean, who knows if he actually said that? The guy just got shot through the heart, not exactly prime time for eloquent speeches, but it's one of those stories that's too good to not tell. The death of their commander could have broken the French attack. Instead, it galvanizes Desailles' men. "Avenge our general" becomes their battle cry as they surge forward with renewed fury. And then comes the masterstroke. As the Austrians struggle to deploy from column into line to meet Desailles' infantry attack, Napoleon gives the signal. General Kellerman's 400 heavy cavalrymen mounted on massive horses and armed with long straight swords charge directly into the Austrian flank. The impact is devastating. The Austrian grenadiers, caught in an awkward formation and hit from an unexpected direction, crumble under the cavalry charge. Within minutes, what had been a victorious Austrian army disintegrates into panic. Over 2,000 surrender on the spot, including General Zach himself. The French counterattack spreads across the battlefield like wildfire. Units that had been retreating in defeat just hours earlier are now charging forward, driving the stunned Austrians back toward Marengo and the Bormida River. By nightfall, the battlefield that had witnessed a decisive Austrian victory at 3 o'clock has, by some military miracle, transformed into a decisive French victory by 7. The Austrians retreat in disorder across the Bormida, leaving behind thousands of dead, wounded, and captured. You and Marcel, who hours earlier had been certain you were facing defeat and possibly death, now find yourselves standing victorious on the same ground you'd been forced to abandon. The cost has been terrible, nearly 6,000 French casualties, but the Austrians have lost even more heavily, with 8,000 killed, wounded, or captured. As darkness falls, Napoleon Bonaparte stands triumphant on the battlefield of Marengo. This victory, snatched from the jaws of defeat, will cement his position as first consul of France and pave the way for his eventual coronation as emperor. And as for you and Marcel, you're alive, which is more than can be said for many of your comrades. You're exhausted, hungry, and blood-spattered, but alive. The next morning, the Austrian commander, General Melas, the man who'd been so confident of victory that he'd returned to Alessandria to write his triumphant dispatch, sends negotiators to Napoleon. The armistice he signs will give France control of northern Italy and cement Napoleon's reputation as a military genius. What no one mentions, of course, is how close it had been, how near to total disaster. In later years, Napoleon would rewrite the history of Marengo, downplaying his initial mistake and the role of men like Desailles and Kellerman in salvaging victory. The official narrative would become one of strategic brilliance rather than a desperate comeback. But those who were there, men like you and Marcel, would know the truth, that Marengo wasn't just a victory, it was a miracle. That evening, legend has it that Napoleon, hungry after his near-defeat-turned-stunning victory, asked his chef to prepare him a meal. The chef, finding little in the way of provisions, cobbled together a dish using a scrawny chicken, tomatoes, garlic, and other ingredients foraged from nearby farms. This improvised dish would become known as chicken Marengo, supposedly one of Napoleon's favourites thereafter. Like many good stories, it's probably not entirely true. Napoleon's chef at the time, a man named Dunand, wasn't even with him at Marengo, and tomatoes weren't common in northern Italian cuisine of the period. But again, why let facts get in the way of a good story? As you sit by a campfire that night, sharing a meagre meal with Marcel and the other survivors, the magnitude of what you've just lived through begins to sink in. You've witnessed one of history's most dramatic battlefield reversals, a defeat transformed into victory through a combination of leadership, courage, and simple luck. The little corporal pulled it off again, Marcel says, gnawing on a piece of bread. Don't know how he does it. But you were there. You saw how close it came to disaster, and you can't help but wonder how many more miracles can one man's luck provide? How many more times can defeat be turned to victory? For now, though, you're simply grateful to be alive as you stretch out on the hard ground, your body aching from the day's exertions. As you drift towards sleep, the sounds of the army settling down for the night surround you, so different from the peaceful quiet of your bedroom back home. Unlike your comfortable modern bed with its soft pillows and warm blankets, tonight you'll sleep on Italian soil beneath the stars with only a thin blanket between you and the earth. But you'll sleep as victors, not as defeated men, and sometimes that makes all the difference. The morning after Marengo is strangely quiet. Dawn breaks over a landscape transformed by violence. Yesterday, these fields outside Alessandria were green with summer crops. Now they're churned to mud and stained dark with blood. The air carries the metallic tang of gunpowder mixed with something worse, the beginning of decay, as thousands of bodies lie where they fell. You're one of the lucky ones. You survived. Your regiment took heavy casualties, almost 40%, but you and your friend Marcel made it through with nothing worse than exhaustion and a few scrapes. As you pick your way through the battlefield, helping to collect the wounded, the reality of yesterday's miracle victory sinks in. The French soldiers around you move with the hollow-eyed 1,000-yard stare that comes after cheating death. Nobody's celebrating. There's too much work to do, too many friends to bury. This is the part they never tell you about in the recruiting speeches, Marcel mutters, helping you carry a wounded man to the field hospital, really just a collection of tents where overworked surgeons labour non-stop, their aprons so soaked with blood they look like butchers. The day after glory. The wounded man between you whimpers as you jolt over uneven ground. He can't be more than 16, a drummer boy caught by Austrian grape shot. His left leg is a mangled mess below the knee. He'll lose the leg, Marcel says quietly, making sure the boy can't hear. If he's lucky, that's all he'll lose. Death doesn't always come quickly on the battlefield. Sometimes it lingers for days as infection sets in. You've seen it before, the slow spread of putrefaction, the fever, the delirium, men begging for water, then begging for death. You reach the hospital tents and surrender your burden to a harried medical orderly. The smell inside is overwhelming: blood, urine, feces, and the sickly sweet odour of gangrene. The sound is worse: moans, screams, and the terrible wet sounds of surgery performed without anaesthesia. "Come on," Marcel says, pulling you away. "Nothing more we can do here." As you walk back toward your regiment's position, you pass a different kind of tent, larger, with guards posted outside. The Emperor's tent. Not that he's Emperor yet. In 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte is still just the first consul of France, technically one of 3 men sharing power. But everyone knows who's really in charge. They say he slept on the battlefield last night, Marcel tells you, just like he promised. You believe that? You ask. Marcel snorts. Maybe, maybe not, but the men believe it, and that's what matters. That's Napoleon's genius. He knows exactly what his soldiers need to hear, what stories will fire their imagination and loyalty. Whether he actually slept on the hard ground or retired to a comfortable bed in a requisitioned villa doesn't matter. The legend is what counts. And speaking of legends, as you pass the command tent, the flap opens and out steps the man himself. It's your first close look at Napoleon Bonaparte, and he's smaller than you expected, not the tiny figure of later British propaganda, but certainly not imposing, maybe 5'6", with a pale complexion and dark hair cut short in the Roman style. But his eyes, there's something in those grey-blue eyes that makes you straighten automatically, like a schoolboy caught slouching. He's surrounded by a cluster of officers in brilliant uniforms, a stark contrast to his own simple green coat of a colonel of the chasseurs à cheval, his favourite regiment of the consular guard. While his generals gleam with gold braid and decorations, Napoleon's only ornament is a small tricolour cockade on his plain bicorn hat. He pauses, surveying the battlefield with those penetrating eyes. Then he notices you and Marcel, two common soldiers frozen in mid-step. "From which regiment?" he asks directly, his voice higher than you'd imagined, his accent still carrying traces of his Corsican origins. Marcel snaps to attention. "The 9th Light, Citizen First Consul, Lanz's division. The 9th? You fought well yesterday." Napoleon's gaze moves between you. "Were you present for the final attack?" "Yes, Citizen First Consul," Marcel answers. "We were retreating with the rest when General Desai arrived. We turned and fought." A shadow crosses Napoleon's face at the mention of Desai, a great man. France has lost one of her finest sons. There's genuine emotion in his voice. You've heard that Napoleon and Desai were close friends, comrades from the Egyptian campaign of 1798. Now Desai lies dead, another body cooling on the field of Marengo. "How is the morale in your unit?" Napoleon asks, shifting topics abruptly. Marcel hesitates, and you can see him debating whether to speak the unvarnished truth or a comforting lie. He opts for somewhere in between. "The men are tired, Citizen First Consul, and hungry, but proud of yesterday's victory." Napoleon nods, as if this confirms what he already knows. "The supply wagons will arrive today. Meanwhile, there will be distributions of captured Austrian provisions." His gaze moves to you. "And you, soldier? Your thoughts?" The question catches you off guard. You're nobody, just one common soldier among thousands. Yet here's Napoleon Bonaparte asking your opinion as if it matters. I think the men would fight better on full stomachs, Citizen First Consul," you manage, immediately regretting your boldness. But Napoleon's mouth quirks in what might be the ghost of a smile. "Indeed, an army marches on its stomach, as I am constantly reminding my quartermasters." He turns to one of his aides. "General Berthier, see to it that food distributions begin immediately, using the Austrian supplies if necessary." "Yes, Citizen First Consul," the aide responds. With a curt nod to you and Marcel, Napoleon continues on his inspection, trailed by his entourage of glittering officers. "Holy shit," you breathe once he's out of earshot. "Did that just happen?" Marcel looks equally stunned. "I think we just became part of the legend, and that's how legends grow, one small interaction at a time, spreading through an army of thousands." By nightfall, the story of Napoleon personally ordering food distributions after speaking with common soldiers will have travelled through the entire camp, growing more impressive with each retelling. The reality of those food distributions is somewhat less impressive. Your dinner that evening consists of captured Austrian hardtack rock-hard biscuits designed to last for months without spoiling, softened in brackish water, along with a small portion of salted pork and a ladleful of thin soup. Luxury compared to yesterday's near starvation, but hardly a feast. Still, with full bellies for the first time in days, the mood in the camp improves noticeably. Men who yesterday were too exhausted to do more than collapse into sleep now sit around campfires, talking and even laughing. The horror of battle begins to fade, replaced by the peculiar camaraderie that exists only among those who have faced death together and survived. "You know what's funny?" Marcel says, chewing thoughtfully on his softened hardtack. "I've been in the army 7 years, fought in maybe 20 battles, and I can't remember most of them. They all blur together after a while, but I'll remember Marengo till the day I die." "Because we almost lost?" you ask. He shakes his head, because we shouldn't have won. Days like yesterday, they're what separate the truly great generals from the merely good ones. Any officer can win when everything goes according to plan, but to snatch victory from certain defeat, that takes something special. Around your campfire, other soldiers nod in agreement. Despite his mistakes earlier in the day, spreading the army too thin, misreading Austrian intentions, Napoleon had managed to turn catastrophe into triumph in the space of a few hours. If that isn't military genius, what is? As night falls, you find yourself assigned to sentry duty along with Marcel and 2 other men from your company. Your post is near the edge of the camp with a clear view of the darkened battlefield where Austrian torches flicker as they continue collecting their dead and wounded. "Think they'll try again tomorrow?" one of the other sentries asks nervously, a young recruit on his first campaign. Marcel shakes his head. "Not a chance. Their army's broken. Melas will be lucky if he can get his remaining forces across the Po River intact." "So what happens now?" you ask. Marcel shrugs. "The Austrians sue for peace. We get to go home heroes. Bonaparte becomes a little more powerful, and then we wait for the next war to start." "You're a cynical bastard," the 4th sentry laughs. 7 years in Bonaparte's armies will do that to you, Marcel replies, but there's no bitterness in his voice. Despite his cynicism, you know he admires Napoleon. They all do, these veterans who followed him from victory to victory across Italy, Egypt, and now back to Italy again. The night passes slowly. You fight to stay awake, pinching yourself and pacing to keep from nodding off. Falling asleep on sentry duty is punishable by death, though in practice, first offences are usually handled with a brutal flogging instead. Neither option appeals to you. Around midnight, you notice movement on the darkened plain. Tensing, you raise your musket, peering into the gloom, but it's not an Austrian patrol, it's a woman moving among the bodies with a lantern. "What the hell?" the young recruit whispers. "Who is that?" "Camp follower," Marcel says grimly, "robbing the dead." In every army, there are women who follow the troops' wives, lovers, laundresses, cooks, and yes, scavengers who strip the battlefield of valuables after the fighting ends. It's a grim business, but a profitable one. "Shouldn't we stop her?" you ask. Marcel shrugs. "Why? The dead have no use for coins or rings, and she's probably got children to feed." It's another harsh reality of war that the romantic paintings and heroic poems never mention the desperate ecosystem that springs up around armies. For every soldier in Napoleon's forces, there's at least one civilian whose livelihood depends on the military machine. Sutlers selling food and drink, women washing clothes and tending the sick, craftsmen repairing equipment, and less savoury characters providing gambling, prostitution and other vices. Dawn arrives with a thin drizzle that turns the churned earth to mud. Your sentry duty over, you trudge back to your regiment's position, looking forward to a few hours of sleep before whatever tasks the day brings. But as you approach the camp, you notice unusual activity, officers shouting orders, men forming into columns, supply wagons being loaded. "What's happening?" you ask a passing sergeant. "We're moving out," he answers. "First consul's orders. The whole army's heading east." East? But the Austrians retreated west. The sergeant gives you a look that suggests he's questioning your intelligence. "We're not chasing them, you idiot. We're going to Milan. Word is Bonaparte's negotiating an armistice, but he wants to do it from a position of strength. That means securing northern Italy." This is classic Napoleon never resting, always pushing forward, using momentum to multiply the impact of victory. While other generals might have paused to rest their troops after a battle like Marengo, Bonaparte is already thinking 3 moves ahead, positioning his forces to maximise political leverage. Within hours, the entire French army is on the move, leaving behind burial details to inter the dead of both sides. The rain continues, turning the roads to muddy tracks that suck at your boots with every step. The march is miserable cold, wet, exhausting, but at least you're alive to suffer through it, which is more than can be said for the thousands left behind in the fields of Marengo. Marcel walks beside you, somehow maintaining his usual stoic expression despite the discomfort. "You know what's strange?" he says after several miles of silent trudging. "This campaign's lasted barely a month, but it feels like a year." He's right. It's hard to believe that just weeks ago you were part of the army of reserve assembling at Dijon in eastern France. From there, you'd marched to Geneva, then undertaken the grueling crossing of the Alps via the Great St. Bernard Pass, a feat that military historians would later rank alongside Hannibal's famous crossing 2,000 years earlier. The reality of that crossing had been far less romantic than Jacques-Louis David would later paint it. No rearing charger for Napoleon, who actually rode a sure-footed mule, no dramatic cape billowing in mountain winds, just thousands of men struggling up narrow paths, dragging artillery pieces disassembled and carried in hollowed-out tree trunks, losing fingers to frostbite and comrades to avalanches. After descending into Italy, you'd fought a series of small but sharp engagements as Napoleon manoeuvred to cut the Austrian supply lines. Then came Marengo itself, the battle that had nearly ended in disaster before becoming Bonaparte's latest miracle. And now you're marching again, eastward toward Milan, the capital of Lombardy and the political prize of the campaign. Your feet hurt, your uniform chafes where it's soaked through, and your empty stomach reminds you that the promised supply wagons still haven't fully caught up with the army. But the column's mood is surprisingly upbeat. Victory has a way of making discomfort more bearable. Men sing as they march old revolutionary songs mostly, with a few bawdier tavern tunes mixed in. Officers who might normally crack down on such informality let it pass. After Marengo, the army has earned some latitude. 3 days later, you reach Milan. The city welcomes the French army as liberators, at least officially. Civic leaders who only weeks earlier had pledged loyalty to Austria now proclaim their eternal devotion to France and First Consul Bonaparte. Flags are raised, speeches made, victory parades organised. For common soldiers like you, the city's welcome translates to more practical benefits. Real beds in requisitioned housing, decent food, and brief liberty to explore the city's taverns, cafes, and other entertainments. Now this, Marcel says, leaning back in a chair at a small cafe near Milan's magnificent cathedral, is how military campaigns should end. You have to agree. After weeks of hard marching, inadequate rations, and the terror of battle, civilization feels like an impossible luxury. The coffee in your cup is hot and strong, the bread on your plate is fresh, and for the first time in memory, you don't smell of sweat, mud, and gunpowder, having taken advantage of actual bathing facilities at your billet. Enjoy it while it lasts, Marcel advises, taking an appreciative sip of local wine. We'll be marching again before you know it. You think so? I heard the Austrians are negotiating. Marcel nods. They are, but signing papers doesn't mean the war's over. They're still fighting in Germany, and even if peace comes tomorrow, Bonaparte will find another war soon enough. He always does. There's no judgment in Marcel's voice, just the pragmatic assessment of a career soldier who has learned not to hope for long periods of peace. Napoleon's France is a nation perpetually at war, either with foreign enemies or its own counter-revolutionary factions. For men like Marcel, peace would mean unemployment at best, half-pay retirement at worst. As if to punctuate his point, a breathless young officer appears at your table, clearly searching for men from your regiment. "You two, 9th Light?" he demands. Marcel straightens. "Yes, Lieutenant." "Report to headquarters immediately. Fatigue detail." So much for your afternoon of leisure. Within the hour, you and Marcel are part of a working party unloading supply wagons in the courtyard of the Palazzo Reale, Milan's royal palace and Napoleon's temporary headquarters. As you labour, the palace buzzes with activity. Couriers come and go, bearing dispatches from other French armies and responses to Austrian peace overtures. Staff officers hurry between meetings, arms full of maps and documents. It's the nerve centre of an empire in the making, though in 1800 few would have predicted how far Napoleon's ambitions would eventually reach. Through an open window, you catch glimpses of the man himself working at a desk piled high with papers. Unlike his subordinates who seem harried and exhausted, Napoleon appears energized, moving from task to task with relentless focus. They say he needs only 4 hours of sleep per night, an inhuman schedule that leaves more time for the business of war and governance. "He never stops, does he?" you murmur to Marcel as you haul another crate of supplies. "That's why he wins," Marcel replies simply. "While other generals sleep, he plans. While kings hold court, he studies maps. He outworks everyone." It's an insight into Napoleon that historians would later confirm. His genius wasn't just tactical brilliance or personal courage, but an almost supernatural capacity for work, an ability to process information and make decisions faster than his opponents. The fatigue detail lasts well into evening. By the time you're dismissed, night has fallen over Milan, and all thoughts of enjoying the city's pleasures have been replaced by the simple desire for sleep. You stumble back to your billet, a small room shared with Marcel and 3 other soldiers in a requisitioned townhouse, and collapse onto your straw mattress without even removing your boots. For once, sleep comes easily, without the nightmares that often followed battle. Perhaps it's simple exhaustion, or perhaps it's the knowledge that, for now at least, you're safe. The Austrians are in retreat, peace negotiations are underway, and you've survived another campaign under the banner of the most successful general in Europe. As consciousness fades, your thoughts drift to Napoleon, still working by candlelight in his palace office while his soldiers sleep. What visions drive him? What ambitions keep him awake while others rest? What will he lead France to next? Those are questions for tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep the sleep of the victorious, deep and dreamless, and mercifully far from the bloodied fields of Marengo. A week passes in Milan. The rhythm of military occupation settles into something almost resembling normal life. Your regiment is assigned to guard duty at various points throughout the city. Mundane work compared to the terror and glory of battle, but nobody's complaining. Guard duty means regular meals, dry beds, and a distinct lack of people trying to kill you. After Marengo, such simple comforts feel like luxury. Today, you're posted outside the Palazzo Serbelloni, a magnificent aristocratic residence where high-level negotiations between French and Austrian representatives are taking place. The Austrians have sent Count Joseph von Neipperg to hammer out armistice terms with Napoleon's chief of staff, General Alexandre Berthier. "Stand up straight," Marcel hisses as a group of officers approaches the palace entrance. That's Berthier himself. You stiffen to attention as General Berthier passes, trailed by aides carrying map cases and document folios. He barely glances at you and Marcel, just 2 more anonymous soldiers among thousands. "Think they'll reach an agreement today?" you ask once the officers are inside. Marcel shrugs. They will eventually. The Austrians don't have much choice after Marengo. It's just a question of how many concessions Bonaparte squeezes out of them. And then we go home? Marcel gives you a pitying look. Maybe you do, if your enlistment's up. The rest of us go wherever Bonaparte points next. The doors open again, and this time it's the Austrian delegation arriving, somber men in white uniforms with green facings, their faces carefully blank as they pass between French guards. You notice they still wear their sidearms, a diplomatic courtesy that acknowledges their status as negotiators rather than prisoners. "That's Nyperg," Marcel says quietly, nodding toward a tall, distinguished-looking Austrian. "They say he's sleeping with Napoleon's wife back in Paris." "What? You nearly drop your musket in shock. How would you even know that?" "Rumours. The army runs on 'em. Probably not true, but makes for good gossip." Ironically, while the rumour about Josephine and Nyperg in 1800 was false, history would take a strange turn. Years later, after Napoleon divorced Josephine and married Marie-Louise of Austria, Nyperg would indeed become Marie-Louise's lover and eventually her husband after Napoleon's final defeat. But that's the future. For now, Count Nyperg is just a defeated Austrian trying to salvage what he can from negotiations with the victorious French. The morning passes slowly. Guard duty is mind-numbingly dull hours of standing at attention, punctuated by brief moments of activity when someone enters or exits the palace. Your legs ache, your back stiffens, and boredom becomes its own special form of torture. "What do you think they're talking about in there?" you ask Marcel during a quiet moment. "Territory, money, prisoners, the usual." Marcel's been through this before in previous campaigns. Bonaparte will demand northern Italy, maybe parts of Germany too. The Austrians will try to keep as much as they can. Eventually they'll reach a compromise that neither side loves, but both can live with. "And that's peace?" Marcel snorts. "That's a pause. Big difference." Around midday, the negotiations break for lunch. Servants appear with trays of food and wine, not for the guards of course, but for the diplomats inside. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread wafts through the open doors, making your stomach growl despite the bread and cheese you had for breakfast. "Christ, I'm starving," you mutter. "Always are on guard duty," Marcel commiserates. "It's the standing still, burns more energy than marching somehow." As the diplomatic lunch continues inside, you notice a small commotion at the far end of the street. A crowd is gathering, parting to make way for someone. Then you hear it, the growing sound of cheers and applause, moving closer. "Bonaparte," Marcel says, straightening his posture. "Has to be." He's right. Moments later, Napoleon himself appears, walking briskly toward the palace. Unlike his usual military entourage, he's accompanied by just 2 aides and seems to be in civilian dress, a simple dark coat and white breeches rather than his military uniform. The crowd follows at a respectful distance, ordinary Milanese citizens straining for a glimpse of the man who has become the most famous figure in Europe. Some call out his name, others simply applaud. Napoleon acknowledges them with brief nods but doesn't slow his pace. As he reaches the palace steps, you and Marcel snap to attention, presenting arms with parade ground precision. Napoleon pauses, his sharp gaze taking in your regiment's insignia. "The 9th Light," he remarks. "You were at Marengo." "Yes, citizen first consul," you both answer in unison. Napoleon studies your faces for a moment, and to your surprise, a flicker of recognition crosses his features as he looks at you. "We've met before, soldier." You're stunned that he remembers. "Yes, citizen first consul, the morning after the battle." He nods, satisfied. "How is morale in the city?" "Good, citizen first consul," Marcel answers. "The men are well rested and well fed." "Excellent. They've earned it." With that, Napoleon continues into the palace, leaving you and Marcel exchanging astonished glances. "Did that just happen?" you whisper once he's gone. "Again?" "His memory is unnatural," Marcel says, shaking his head in wonder. "They say he knows thousands of his soldiers by name, remembers details about their service, their hometowns, their families." It's another element of the Bonaparte legend, his ability to connect with common soldiers, to make each man feel personally valued. Whether it's a calculated political skill or genuine interest hardly matters. The effect is the same: unshakable loyalty from the ranks. Inside the palace, the tempo of negotiations shifts with Napoleon's arrival. Though you can't hear what's being said, the pattern of people coming and going, aides rushing with documents, officers being summoned and dismissed, suggests increasing urgency. "He's taking over," Marcel observes. "Berthier was just keeping the chair warm." By late afternoon, an unusual stillness has fallen over the palace. No more messengers rushing in and out, no more huddles of staff officers discussing developments. Whatever is happening inside has reached a critical stage. When the doors finally open around dusk, both delegations emerge together. French and Austrian officers intermingled, their expressions professional but noticeably relaxed compared to earlier. Behind them comes Napoleon, deep in conversation with Count Nyperg. "It's done," Marcel murmurs. "Look at them." You see what he means. The body language has changed completely. There's still formality, but the tension has dissipated. Whatever terms have been agreed upon, both sides seem reasonably satisfied or at least resigned. Napoleon and Nyperg pause at the top of the palace steps. They shake hands firmly, exchange a few final words, then part ways, Nyperg to rejoin his Austrian colleagues, Napoleon to confer with Berthier and his staff. As darkness falls, you and Marcel are finally relieved from your post by the night watch. Your legs are cramping from hours of standing, and your empty stomach has progressed from complaining to outright rebellion. "Come on," Marcel says. "I know a tavern near our billet. Not too expensive." The tavern is crowded with off-duty French soldiers and curious locals. Despite the language barrier, a rowdy camaraderie has developed, aided by the universal translators of wine, music, and mutual curiosity. You find a small table in the corner, and Marcel somehow procures 2 bowls of hearty bean soup and a carafe of local wine. "To peace," he says, raising his cup, "however temporary." You clink cups and take a grateful swallow. The wine is rough but honest, warming you from the inside. "So, what happens now?" you ask between spoonfuls of soup. "Now?" Marcel tears off a chunk of bread. Now the first consul becomes more powerful than ever. Marengo's made him untouchable. The revolution's over, my friend. Bonaparte's France is beginning. Is that good or bad? Marcel considers the question seriously. Depends. For soldiers, probably good, at least for a while. He takes care of the army. For France, who knows? He's brought order after chaos, which most people appreciate, but men with that much ambition rarely stop reaching for more. You're not much for politics. Your enlistment in the French army had been more about escaping poverty than revolutionary ideals, but even you can sense the historical weight of what's happening, the French Revolution's turbulent energy channeling itself into one extraordinary man's vision. They're saying he'll be named consul for life, Marcel continues, lowering his voice, though the tavern's noise makes it unlikely anyone could overhear. First step to becoming king in all but name. Isn't that against everything the revolution stood for? Revolutions devour themselves, kid. Always have, always will. The idealists start them, then the pragmatists take over, then the strong men restore order. Tale as old as time. Before you can respond, the tavern door bursts open, and a breathless young officer appears. The room gradually quiets as he makes his way to the centre. "For citizens, soldiers of France," he announces, his voice carrying above the diminishing conversation, "I bring news from the Palazzo Serbelloni. The Convention of Alessandria has been signed." A murmur runs through the crowd. "Austria cedes all territory in Italy, north of the Po River." The officer continues. All Austrian forces must withdraw behind the Mincio River within 2 weeks. The fortresses of Tortona, Alessandria, Milan, Turin and Genoa are to be surrendered to French control. The tavern erupts in cheers. Men pound tables, raise glasses, embrace each other. In one stroke, Napoleon has regained nearly everything France lost in Italy during his absence in Egypt. The campaign that began with the daring crossing of the Alps has concluded with complete success. And one more announcement, the officer shouts over the celebration. The first consul will depart for Paris within 3 days. Units assigned to the Army of Italy will remain under General Massena's command. All others will prepare to return to France. This news brings another round of cheers, especially from those like you whose regiments aren't part of the occupation force. Going home, or at least back to France, is a prospect worth celebrating. "Looks like you might get your wish after all," Marcel says, refilling your cup. "Paris isn't home, but it's closer than Milan." The tavern celebration continues well into the night. Songs are sung old revolutionary anthems mostly, with lyrics hastily updated to praise Bonaparte rather than abstract notions of liberty. Toasts are made to France, to the army, to the first consul, to fallen comrades. A few brave souls even attempt to teach French drinking songs to the bemused Italian tavern staff. It's past midnight when you and Marcel finally stagger back to your billet, pleasantly drunk and buoyed by the news of peace and homeward movement. The streets of Milan are still lively despite the hour other soldiers and civilians continuing impromptu celebrations. Torches and lanterns illuminating the ancient thoroughfares. "You know what's strange?" Marcel slurs slightly as you navigate the narrow lanes. "This whole campaign, barely 6 weeks from start to finish. Crossed the Alps, won some skirmishes, lost a battle, won it again, secured northern Italy, signed a peace treaty. 6 weeks. Most campaigns take years." He's right. The speed of the Italian campaign has been breathtaking, a testament to Napoleon's style of warfare, rapid movement, decisive concentration of forces, and immediate political exploitation of military success. It's a new kind of war for a new century, and conventional powers like Austria are struggling to adapt. The next morning brings the predictable consequences of celebratory excess-pounding headaches and queasy stomachs, but it also brings new orders. Your regiment, along with several others from Lanz's division, will indeed be returning to France as part of Napoleon's escort. "Could be worse," Marcel comments as you pack your meagre belongings. "Escort duty means decent roads and regular supplies. Better than staying here to garrison Milan through winter." The preparations for departure consume the next 2 days. Equipment is checked, damaged items replaced, ammunition distributed, administrative matters are handled with surprising efficiency, pay arrears settled, casualty lists finalised, commendations recorded. Throughout it all, a sense of accomplishment permeates the army. These men have participated in something extraordinary, a campaign that will feature in history books and military academies for generations to come. They've followed Napoleon Bonaparte over the Alps, like Hannibal's legendary crossing, fought against overwhelming odds at Marengo, and emerged victorious. On the morning of the 3rd day, you assemble with your regiment in Milan's main square. The mood is festive despite the early hour. Local dignitaries have organised a farewell ceremony, complete with speeches, musical performances, and presentations of ceremonial gifts to Napoleon and his senior officers. Napoleon himself appears just as the sun fully clears the horizon. He's back in military uniform now, the simple green coat of a colonel of the chasseurs à cheval that he prefers for travel. He looks rested and energised, a man satisfied with his accomplishments but already focused on what comes next. The farewell ceremony is mercifully brief by diplomatic standards, less than an hour of speeches and formalities before the order is given to march. As the regiments form into column, Napoleon rides to the head of the procession, accompanied by his personal guard and senior staff. And just like that, you're leaving Milan, retracing your steps across northern Italy, this time as part of a triumphant procession rather than an invading army. The pace is deliberately measured about 15 miles per day, comfortable enough to avoid exhaustion, but sufficient to make steady progress toward France. So different from coming here, you comment to Marcel as you march. No forced marches, no short rations, no Austrians trying to kill us. Enjoy it, he advises. Peace never lasts. The journey takes on an almost ceremonial quality. In each town and village, local officials organise welcomes for the first consul. Women toss flowers, children wave improvised tricolour flags. Feasts are prepared for officers while common soldiers receive at least token hospitality. It's like a Roman triumph, Marcel observes after one such reception. The conquering hero returns in glory. The comparison is apt. Napoleon has consciously modelled many aspects of his public image on ancient Rome, from his close-cropped Brutus hairstyle to the eagles that will soon crown French regimental standards. The Roman parallels feed his legend and align him with classical virtues of discipline, courage, and civic duty. 6 days into the journey, you reach the foothills of the Alps, the same mountains that posed such a formidable challenge during your advance into Italy now stand as the final barrier between you and France. But this crossing will be different: better weather, established routes, proper supplies. The night before beginning the ascent, your regiment camps near a small Italian village nestled against the mountain's slopes. As darkness falls, campfires blossom across the valley floor, thousands of pinpricks of light marking the presence of Napoleon's returning army. You sit with Marcel and others from your company, sharing wine purchased from villagers and trading stories of the campaign. The conversation eventually turns to Marengo itself, the pivotal moment that transformed the entire expedition from potential disaster to unqualified success. "I still don't understand how we won," a young recruit admits. "We were beaten, actually beaten. I was running away, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. How did it turn around so fast?" "De Sykes' arrival helped," an older sergeant answers. "Fresh troops when we needed them most, and Kellerman's cavalry charge," another adds. "Never seen anything like it. 400 horsemen breaking thousands of Austrian grenadiers. But it was Bonaparte who put it all together," Marcel says quietly. "Any other general would have accepted defeat, tried to save what he could. He refused to lose, so he didn't." There's murmured agreement around the fire. Whatever his other qualities, Napoleon Bonaparte possesses an indomitable will that seems to bend reality to his purposes. It's a trait that inspires both admiration and unease, even among his devoted soldiers. As the fire burns down to embers and men begin to seek their bedrolls, you find yourself strangely reflective. The campaign has changed you in ways you're only beginning to understand. You've seen death up close, experienced the chaotic terror of battle, witnessed history being made by extraordinary individuals. "Marcel," you say as you both prepare for sleep, "do you ever wonder what all this is for? The fighting, the dying, the treaties that won't last?" He's quiet for a long moment, staring up at the star-filled sky. "Sometimes," he finally answers, "but I've stopped looking for meaning in the grand sweep of things. There's just the duty in front of you, the comrades beside you, and the life you make between battles." "That's it?" "That's plenty." He rolls onto his side, pulling his blanket tighter. "Get some sleep. We start climbing tomorrow." As you lie back on your simple bedroll, so different from your comfortable bed at home, you ponder Marcel's philosophy. Perhaps he's right. Perhaps there is no greater meaning to find in empires rising and falling, in borders being drawn and redrawn by men like Napoleon Bonaparte. Or perhaps you're simply too close to these events to see their true significance. Maybe future generations will look back on this time on Marengo, on Napoleon's rise, on this entire era of revolution and war, and discern patterns and purpose that remain invisible to those living through them. The thought is somehow comforting as you drift towards sleep, the distant silhouette of the Alps black against the night sky, the same mountains Hannibal crossed with his elephants that countless armies have traversed throughout history. You're just one more soldier making that journey, playing your small part in a story that began long before you and will continue long after. Tomorrow, you'll begin climbing toward France, toward whatever future awaits in Napoleon's rapidly evolving empire. But tonight, under the Italian stars, you rest with the simple satisfaction of having survived, of having witnessed history, of having marched with Napoleon Bonaparte during one of his finest hours, the miracle of Marengo. The crossing of the Alps is easier this time. Instead of the treacherous St. Bernard Pass with its narrow paths and deadly precipices, Napoleon's returning column takes the broader, gentler Mont Cenis route. Instead of spring snowstorms and freezing temperatures, you march under clear summer skies. Instead of dragging disassembled artillery through snow and ice, you travel with minimal baggage on well-maintained roads. It's almost disappointingly mundane after the legendary difficulty of your outward journey. Not quite as heroic this time, is it? Marcel comments as you make steady progress up the switchback path. Won't make for such a dramatic painting. He's referring to rumours that Napoleon has commissioned artwork depicting his Alpine crossing, though the actual paintings wouldn't appear until months later. When they did, Jacques-Louis David's famous portrayal would show Napoleon on a rearing stallion, cloak billowing dramatically, pointing the way forward like a conquering Caesar. The reality had been far less romantic. Bonaparte crossing on a sure-footed mule, wearing a plain greatcoat rather than a theatrical cape, guided by local shepherds rather than leading from the front. History and truth don't always match up, you observe. Marcel laughs. Now you're getting it. Half of what they'll say about this campaign will be bullshit, but impressive bullshit that serves France, so who cares? 3 days of steady climbing brings you to the pass itself. At the summit, many soldiers pause to look back at Italy spread below the land you fought for, conquered, and are now leaving behind. From this height, there's no brutal cold, crushing snow, and deadly winds. For 6 decades, mountain men in the Rocky Mountains faced winter conditions that would kill an unprepared person in under an hour. Their solution? Brilliantly designed shelter systems built entirely from wilderness materials that could maintain survivable temperatures through month-long blizzards. Here's the hidden genius behind their life-saving structures. Quick subscribe reminder if you're a regular. Also, where's everyone at tonight? Or morning? Or afternoon? Drop your location and time. Got comments from Seattle to Stockholm last time. The time zone thing never stops being weird to me. Okay, tonight it's the Rocky Mountain winter. But wait, are you comfortable? Like actually comfortable? Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes snap open to darkness. The bitter cold hits your face like a slap. The only part of you exposed to the air. You're lying on a raised wooden platform covered with several buffalo robes. Not quite soft, but better than the frozen ground. The temperature inside the crude log shelter hovers around freezing, which is actually a massive improvement from the negative 30 degrees outside. The sound that woke you is unmistakable. The howling winds of a blizzard that just rolled in. That special kind of howl that means you'd be dead in under an hour if you were caught outside. Unlike your cozy bed with its temperature-controlled room, you've got exactly one heat source. The stone fireplace that's already burning dangerously low. If it goes out completely, you might not wake up tomorrow. First rule of mountain living, I can almost hear veteran trapper Samuel Mackenzie saying in my head, "Fire dies, you die." And Sam would know. By 1837, he'd survived 17 Rocky Mountain winters, outlasting hundreds of other trappers who made just one critical mistake. That's the thing about mountain life in the 1820s to 1880s. There were no second chances, no rescue teams, no emergency services, just you, your knowledge, and whatever you could build with your hands. So congratulations, you're a mountain man in the dead of winter, and your very first task of the day is making sure you don't freeze to death before breakfast. The shelter you're in isn't some thrown-together lean-to. It's a carefully engineered survival system. Hold up. Let me paint you a picture of what these places actually looked like. Most people imagine some kind of rustic cabin with a cute chimney and maybe a rocking chair on the porch. The reality? Way more sophisticated and way less comfortable. Think of it as a wilderness life support machine made of logs, stones, and animal hides. You calling this sophisticated, you might be thinking, looking at the rough-hewn log walls and dirt floor? But that's where you'd be wrong. These shelters were marvels of engineering, especially considering they were built with nothing but axes, knives, and pure survival knowledge. The fire in the stone fireplace isn't just for comfort, it's your life support system. Without it, the temperature inside would quickly match the Arctic nightmare outside. You push aside the buffalo robes and swing your legs over the edge of the sleeping platform, your feet finding the rough leather moccasins you left perfectly positioned for this moment. Even the few seconds your feet would spend on the cold dirt floor would be painful. The cold makes your shoulder wound ache, an old injury from a Blackfoot arrow that never quite healed right. It's your personal weather predictor. When it throbs like this, it means the storm is going to be a bad one. You make your way to the fireplace and carefully add a small log from the precisely stacked wood pile beside it. Not too big or it'll smother the coals, not too small or it'll burn out too quickly. This is a science, and getting it wrong means death. Let's back up a bit. How did mountain men even end up in these conditions? I mean, who voluntarily signs up for this frozen hellscape? Between 1820 and 1840, roughly 3,000 men ventured into the Rocky Mountains. They were after one thing: beaver pelts. Back then, beaver fur was like gold, used for fashionable hats in Europe and the eastern United States. A good trapper could make more in one season than a factory worker made in 5 years. The financial incentive was huge, but so was the risk. The mountain men weren't just random dudes with the death wish. They were a mix of French-Canadian voyageurs, American frontiersmen, and European immigrants, all drawn by the promise of fortune and freedom. But freedom in the mountains came with a price, and that price was paid in knowledge, preparation, and sometimes blood. You know what separates the dead trappers from the living ones? Old Sam would say, poking at the fire with a stick. It ain't luck, it's knowing where to build. And he's right. In fact, this is wild. The entire foundation of survival wasn't about how tough you were, or how many guns you had. It was about real estate. Location, location, location. The difference between life and death began with choosing the right spot to build your shelter. One wrong choice, like picking a spot prone to avalanches or in a wind tunnel, and you'd be done before the first big storm. I can't stress this enough. Site selection was literally the most critical decision in mountain shelter construction. These guys weren't just looking for pretty views, they were reading the landscape like a survival manual. What were they looking for? First, natural wind protection. The ideal spot would be on the southeast side of a hill, protected from the prevailing northwest winter winds. Mountain men positioned shelters behind rock formations, dense tree groves, or natural terrain features that could deflect the wind. "Wind will kill you faster than cold," Sam would say. "Cold takes hours. Wind takes minutes." Wind protection wasn't just about comfort. It could reduce heating requirements by up to 60% while preventing structural damage. That's the difference between having enough firewood for the winter and freezing to death in January when your supplies run out. A cracking sound from outside makes you freeze. Something or someone is moving around near your shelter. Your Kentucky long rifle is propped in the corner, but you don't reach for it yet. Better to listen first. The sound comes again. Just a tree branch breaking under the weight of snow. The tension releases from your shoulders, but only slightly. Living in the mountains means constant vigilance. The next consideration after wind protection was avoiding areas prone to avalanches, flooding, or excessive snow accumulation. You'd be shocked at how many trappers died not from cold or starvation, but from being buried alive in their shelters by avalanches or crushed under collapsed roofs from snow loads. Terrain analysis required understanding how topography affected wind patterns, snow accumulation, and drainage. Mountain men studied slope angles that could trigger avalanches and identified wind channels that created dangerous downdrafts. They recognized terrain features that provided natural protection from prevailing storm patterns. They avoided valley bottoms where cold air settled and ridge tops where wind exposure was extreme. The ideal site offered southern exposure for maximum solar heating, protection from prevailing winds, and access to water sources that wouldn't freeze completely during winter months. I once asked an old-timer who'd grown up hearing these stories firsthand from the last generation of mountain men how they figured all this out. "Trial and error," he said with a grim smile. Emphasis on the error. The mountains are littered with the bones of men who got it wrong. And that's the thing. There was no wilderness survival guidebook. This knowledge was earned through generations of mistakes, near misses, and watching what happened to the less fortunate. The successful mountain men were those who learned from others' fatal errors. You add another small log to the fire, watching as the flames catch and grow. The dancing light illuminates the inside of your shelter, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind screams past, occasionally finding a tiny gap in your chinking and sending a knife-like draft cutting through the warm air. Drainage and foundation preparation were next on the priority list. Mountain men selected sites with natural drainage and cleared organic matter that could retain moisture. They created foundation systems that elevated living areas above ground moisture while providing stable support for heavy log construction. "Get your floor wet in winter, you might as well dig your own grave," old Sam would say. Proper drainage prevented ice formation that could destabilize foundations and eliminated moisture problems that could create unhealthy living conditions. A wet floor meant wet clothing, wet bedding, and eventually hypothermia. The fire is catching nicely now, and you can feel the heat beginning to push back against the cold. Your fingers, stiff and painful moments ago, start to regain sensation. You flex them carefully, knowing that too much heat too quickly can be almost as painful as the cold. The next critical element was snow load calculations. Yeah, actual engineering calculations, but done through empirical knowledge gained through years of observing how different construction techniques performed under extreme conditions. Mountain men understood that roofs needed to support snow loads of up to 100 pounds per square foot, while maintaining structural integrity during wind events that could create uneven loading patterns. They designed roof angles that promoted snow shedding while maintaining structural strength under maximum loading conditions. Imagine that. No calculators, no structural engineering degree, just knowledge passed down and refined through observation and sometimes deadly consequences. You hear a voice in your head, something your mentor told you years ago when you first came to the mountains as a greenhorn. Build your roof too flat. Snow piles up. Build it too steep. Wind tears it off. There's a sweet spot in between, and you better find it before the first storm. Structural engineering principles were applied using traditional knowledge that had been tested through generations of mountain survival. Mountain men didn't call it engineering, but that's exactly what it was. Log selection focused on species that provided maximum strength-to-weight ratios, proper seasoning that prevented cracking and settling, and construction techniques that created interlocking joints capable of withstanding extreme temperature cycling and structural loads. They preferred lodgepole pine and Douglas fir for their strength characteristics and resistance to temperature-related movement. Not just any tree would do. Green wood would shrink as it dried, creating gaps in the walls. Wood that was too dry might be brittle and crack. Each log was selected with purpose. "You know what most new fellows get wrong?" Sam once asked me, Ondas, not waiting for an answer. "They think any log'll do, but choosing the wrong wood is like choosing the wrong horse. It'll let you down when you need it most." Now, the foundation systems. Mountain men built foundations using stone and timber construction that created stable, well-drained bases for log structures. They elevated living areas above snow level, provided thermal breaks that prevented ground heat loss, and created stable platforms that could support heavy log walls without settling or shifting during freeze-thaw cycles. Stone foundations were carefully fitted without mortar, allowing for thermal movement while maintaining structural stability. This was crucial because the extreme temperature variations in some mountains would cause rigid structures to crack and fail. This is the part that always gets me. These guys understood the concept of thermal expansion and contraction centuries before many formal engineers incorporated it into building codes. They knew that a structure that couldn't flex with temperature changes would eventually tear itself apart. The blizzard outside intensifies, the wind howling like a pack of wolves. You're grateful for the solid walls surrounding you, for the knowledge that went into selecting each log, each stone. Your life depends on decisions made months ago, when the weather was fair and winter seemed distant. Material procurement and preparation required understanding which local materials provided the best construction properties for extreme weather applications. Mountain men selected trees during specific seasons when sap content was lowest. Seasoned logs using natural drying techniques that prevented cracking, and prepared construction materials using hand tools that created precise joints and connections. Basically, there was a right time of year to cut trees, a right way to dry them, and a right way to shape them. Get any part wrong, and your shelter might fail midwinter. You settle back onto your sleeping platform, pulling the buffalo robes around you. The fire crackles pleasantly now, casting a warm glow throughout the shelter. Outside, the blizzard rages, but in here, you're safe. For now. As you drift back towards sleep, you think about the knowledge and work that went into this shelter, the careful site selection, the precise engineering, the materials chosen for their specific properties. None of it was random. All of it was essential. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you'll need to check the roof for snow load, inspect the chinking between the logs, and gather more firewood. Because winter in the mountains doesn't forgive carelessness or complacency. This is just the beginning of understanding how mountain men survived the deadliest winters on Earth. Their knowledge of thermal engineering, heating systems, and heat retention was just as sophisticated as their structural engineering, perhaps even more so. The fire pops and sends a spark dancing across the dirt floor. It dies quickly, but not before reminding you of the central truth of mountain life. Fire means life, and in the mountains, life is never guaranteed. You wake again several hours later, not to the howling wind, but to the bone-deep cold that tells you the fire has burned down to embers. The dark is absolute. That special kind of pitch black that only exists in remote places without electric lights for hundreds of miles. Your breath hangs visible in the air. The buffalo robes have kept you from freezing, but just barely. The storm outside hasn't let up. If anything, it's intensified. You can hear the wind's low moan as it searches for any crack in your shelter's defences. Fire dies, you die. Old Sam's words echo in your head again. Time to move, fast. You swing your legs over the edge of the sleeping platform, sliding your feet into those fur-lined moccasins you strategically placed before sleeping. The floor is cold enough to steal the heat from your body through your feet in minutes. The fireplace is down to a bed of glowing coals, still alive but barely. This is the most critical moment of the night. If you don't get that fire going again, and quickly, the temperature inside will plummet to match the deadly cold outside. What most folks don't realize is that creating and maintaining life-sustaining temperatures in these remote mountain shelters required a sophisticated understanding of heat generation, distribution, and retention, using only natural materials and primitive heating systems. There were no thermostat dials to turn, no backup generators, just your knowledge and whatever you could build with your hands. Thomas Whitaker, a mountain man who survived the brutal winter of 1832, once described it this way: "Out there, your fireplace ain't just for comfort. It's the beating heart of your shelter. Build it wrong, and you'll freeze with a roaring fire burning." You kneel by the fireplace, feeling the faint heat from the remaining coals. The design of this fireplace isn't random. It's the result of generations of trial and error, where errors meant death. Fireplace construction was the heart of mountain shelter heating systems. But these weren't the decorative, smoke-belching fireplaces you might find in some modern cabins. Mountain men built fireplaces using local stone carefully selected for its ability to withstand extreme temperature cycling without cracking. You grab several small pieces of kindling from the neatly stacked pile beside the fireplace. Not random sticks. These are specifically prepared and sorted by size to create the perfect progression from spark to flame. You arrange them carefully over the coals, creating tiny air spaces between each piece. Proper fireplace design included combustion chambers sized for efficient burning, chimney systems that created proper draft while preventing heat loss, and thermal mass systems that stored heat during active burning and released it slowly over extended periods. The trick ain't just making fire, old Sam once told a greenhorn who was struggling to stay warm despite burning through firewood at an alarming rate. The trick is making the fire work for you. Most fools just make smoke and warm the sky. You blow gently on the embers, coaxing them back to life. A small flame appears, dancing along the edge of a piece of kindling. You feed it carefully, gradually adding larger pieces as the fire grows. Chimney design and construction required understanding draft principles, heat retention, and structural stability under extreme temperature conditions. Mountain men built chimneys using stone construction that could withstand thermal cycling, created proper draft angles that ensured efficient combustion, and incorporated heat exchange systems that captured waste heat before it escaped through the chimney. Wait, hold up. Did you catch that? Heat exchange systems. Yeah, these primitive mountain men were building heat exchangers into their chimneys. By running the smoke through chambers of stone or clay before it exited, they extracted maximum heat from every bit of precious firewood. See how this chimney narrows here, then widens there? Sam would explain, pointing to the carefully shaped structure. That ain't random. That's so the heat can't escape too fast. Makes your wood last twice as long. They understood that proper chimney design could increase heating efficiency by up to 40% while preventing dangerous backdrafts and carbon monoxide accumulation. Get it wrong, and you'd either freeze or suffocate. The fire is catching properly now, growing stronger. You add a few more pieces of wood, slightly larger this time. The warmth begins to push back against the cold, and you can feel sensation returning to your fingers and toes. Picture this. It's 35 below zero outside. The wind is howling at 60 miles per hour, but inside a well-built mountain shelter, the temperature hovers around a comfortable 65 degrees. How the hell is that possible with just a fireplace and no insulation as we know it today? The answer lies in thermal mass systems. Mountain men used stone and clay construction that could absorb heat during active burning periods and release stored thermal energy over many hours after fires died down. You look at the large stones that make up the fireplace. They're not just structural, they're functional. During the day, when the fire burns hot, these stones absorb that heat. At night, when the fire burns lower, they release it back into the shelter. Natural thermal batteries. Mountain men positioned thermal mass strategically throughout shelters to create even heat distribution, while maximizing heat storage capacity, using materials that were readily available in wilderness environments. They calculated thermal mass requirements based on shelter size, insulation levels, and expected heating loads during extreme weather conditions. You want stones that hold heat, Sam would say, tapping a particular rock with his knuckle. Not all rocks are the same. Some hold heat like a miser holds gold. Others let it slip away like water through fingers. And he was right. Different types of stone have different thermal mass properties. Soapstone, for example, has excellent heat retention. Granite is decent. Sandstone, not so much. Mountain men knew which stones would best serve as heat batteries long before the science of thermal conductivity was formally understood. The fire is roaring now, filling the shelter with blessed warmth and golden light. You can see your breath less and less as the temperature rises. The chill retreats from your bones. What about heat distribution? It's not enough to have a hot fire in one corner if the rest of your shelter remains freezing. heat distribution systems used natural convection and radiant heating principles to move warm air throughout shelter spaces. Mountain men designed interior layouts that promoted air circulation while preventing heat loss through poorly sealed openings. Strategic placement of thermal mass and heating elements created convection currents that distributed heat evenly throughout living spaces. You notice how the sleeping platform is positioned, elevated above the floor but not too close to the ceiling. This is intentional. Since warm air rises, the highest point in the shelter would be the warmest. Too high, and you'd sweat while sleeping. Too low, and you'd freeze. The platform is placed at exactly the right height to maintain comfortable sleeping temperature. 3 feet off the ground, Sam would say. Any higher and you'll bake like bread. Any lower and you'll freeze like meat. They understood that proper heat distribution could eliminate cold spots and reduce overall fuel consumption by up to 30%. Every piece of firewood saved meant one more day of survival when storms made gathering more impossible. Now let's talk about combustion efficiency, because not all fires are created equal. Mountain men maximized it through proper fuel selection, fire management techniques, and combustion chamber design that extracted maximum heat from available fuel while minimizing smoke production and heat loss. You arrange the logs in the fireplace in a specific pattern, not the teepee shape most casual campers use, but a carefully structured arrangement that allows for proper airflow and sustained burning. Look at these city folks, Sam would laugh, watching a group of eastern hunters struggle with their smoky, inefficient campfire. They think any stick'll burn the same. There's wood that heats, and there's wood that just makes smoke. Know the difference or freeze to death with a roaring fire. Mountain men understood which wood species provided the best heat output, how to season and prepare fuel for optimal burning, and how to manage fires for continuous heat production. They knew that hardwoods like oak and maple provided long-burning coals, while softwoods like pine provided quick ignition and high heat output. You think about the wood pile stacked against the wall. Each piece was selected, cut, and stored with purpose. The smaller pieces of pine for quick, hot fires. The larger chunks of oak and maple for overnight burning. Nothing random about it. Particularly strong gust of wind makes the shelter creak. Something shifts on the roof, probably snow sliding off thanks to the steepened roof angle. The sound makes you think about how much wood you have left. Fuel management systems ensured adequate fuel supplies during extended storms when fuel collection was impossible. Mountain men calculated fuel consumption rates for different weather conditions, established fuel storage systems that kept wood dry and accessible, and developed fuel preparation techniques that maximized heat output while minimizing fuel consumption during critical periods. Your eyes drift to the woodpile. You estimate you have enough for 3 days of continuous burning at the current rate. If the storm lasts longer than that, you'll need to venture out no matter how dangerous to gather more. Always have 3 times the wood you think you'll need was one of Sam's most repeated lessons. Weather don't care about your plans. Mountain men typically stored enough seasoned wood to last through month-long storms with emergency reserves for extended weather events. Running out of firewood mid-blizzard was a death sentence, plain and simple. Outside, the wind howls again, finding some tiny gap in the chinking between logs and sending a knife-like draft cutting through the warm air. You make a mental note to find and seal that gap when there's more light. Heat retention techniques included insulation systems, air sealing methods, and thermal barriers that prevented heat loss while maintaining adequate ventilation for safety and air quality. Wait, insulation. But I said earlier, these shelters didn't have insulation as we know it today. That's true. They didn't have fiberglass or foam, but they absolutely had insulation. Mountain men used natural insulation materials, including animal fur, dried grass, and clay chinking that created effective thermal barriers while allowing controlled air exchange that prevented carbon monoxide buildup. You run your hand along the wall nearest your sleeping platform. Between the logs, the chinking isn't just clay, it's a mixture of clay, dried grass, and in some spots, animal hair. All materials that trap tiny pockets of air. The same principle modern insulation uses. Tight walls make warm nights, Sam would say, carefully packing a mixture of clay and grass between logs, but never too tight. A shelter that don't breathe will suffocate you silent in your sleep. They understood that proper insulation could reduce heating requirements by up to 70% while maintaining comfortable living conditions. The difference between burning 1 cord of wood per week versus 3 or 4, which often meant the difference between survival and freezing. The fire is burning perfectly now, radiating blessed heat throughout the shelter. You sit on the edge of the sleeping platform watching the flames dance. Outside, the blizzard continues unabated, but in here, you're warm. For now. What about when you needed to be away from the fire? Radiant heating systems used heated stones, metal objects, and thermal mass elements that could store heat during active burning periods and release radiant energy over extended periods. You notice several smooth, round stones placed near the fire. These aren't random. Later you'll heat these stones in the fire, wrap them in scraps of hide, and place them in your bedding before sleeping. Instant bed warmers that will radiate heat for hours. Mountain men heated stones in fires and placed them strategically throughout shelters to provide localized heating. They used metal objects as heat sinks that stored and released thermal energy, and designed sleeping areas that maximized radiant heat exposure while maintaining safety margins. A memory flashes through your mind. Sam teaching you how to survive if your fire went out completely. Heat rocks, he said, placing several fist-sized stones at the edge of the fire. If your fire dies and you can't get it going again, put these hot rocks in a circle around you. They'll keep you alive till morning. The fire snaps and pops as a pocket of sap ignites in one of the logs. The dancing flames cast shifting shadows on the walls. Despite the howling storm outside, there's a surprising peacefulness in here. Humans have been gathering around fires for warmth and protection for hundreds of thousands of years. There's something primal and comforting about it. Morning will come eventually, the storm will pass. But for now, your world has contracted to this small, warm space carved out of the deadly winter wilderness. You add another log to the fire, watching as the flames curl around it. There's an art to fire maintenance. Not too much wood at once, or you'll smother it. Not too little, or it'll burn out too quickly. This is the rhythm of mountain life. The constant vigilance. The knowledge that survival depends on 1,000 small decisions made correctly. You stretch your legs toward the fire, feeling the heat seep into your tired muscles. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, checking the roof for snow load, inspecting the walls for new drafts, possibly venturing out for more firewood if the storm breaks. But for now, you've mastered the most crucial survival skill of the mountain man, creating warmth in the face of killing cold. Another log shifts in the fire, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. You think about the mountain men who came before you, who figured out these heating systems through brutal trial and error. How many froze to death before they learned the proper way to build a chimney? How many suffocated from carbon monoxide before they understood the importance of ventilation? We stand on the frozen corpses of those who got it wrong, Sam would say grimly, whenever he taught a new survival technique. Not the most cheerful teaching method, but it drove the point home. The heat from the fire has made you drowsy again. You bank the fire carefully, arranging the logs in a specific pattern that will allow it to burn slowly but steadily for hours. Another skill learned through generations of life or death winters. You return to your sleeping platform, arranging the buffalo robes around you. The platform itself is another example of mountain ingenuity, raised off the cold ground, positioned at the right height to catch the rising warm air, but not so high as to be in the hottest part of the shelter. As you drift back towards sleep, you think about all the knowledge that goes into something as seemingly simple as staying warm. The fireplace construction, the chimney design, the thermal mass, the heat distribution, the combustion efficiency, the fuel management, the heat retention, the radiant heating, none of it random, all of it essential. All of it learned through generations of harsh experience in the unforgiving mountain winters. The fire crackles softly, a sound as comforting as a lullaby. Outside, the blizzard continues its assault, but it can't reach you now. You've mastered the art of creating warmth in one of the coldest places on Earth, using nothing but the materials nature provides, and the knowledge passed down by those who survived before you. This knowledge wasn't just comfort, it was life itself. And tomorrow you'd need to apply an equally sophisticated understanding of weatherproofing to ensure your shelter remained effective as the blizzard continued. The science of weatherproofing, protection systems and environmental control would be just as crucial as the heating systems you've mastered tonight. But that's a challenge for tomorrow. For now, wrapped in buffalo robes with the fire burning steadily, you've accomplished the mountain man's first daily victory, surviving the night. The soft light of dawn seeps through the single small window, a square opening covered with an oiled animal bladder that lets in light but keeps out wind. You've slept better than expected thanks to the steady heat from the fireplace and the buffalo robes. But something's not right. There's a dampness to the air that shouldn't be there. You sit up, instantly alert. Dampness in a mountain shelter during winter isn't just uncomfortable, it's deadly. Where there's dampness, there's a breach in your weatherproofing. And where there's a breach, killing cold can follow. A drop of water lands on your hand. You look up. The ceiling is showing a wet spot, small but growing. The snow on the roof is melting from the heat of your fire, finding some tiny gap in your roof and seeping through. If left unchecked, it'll soak your bedding, your clothes, and eventually you. In sub-zero temperatures, wet means dead. The Henderson family learned this the hard way. During their first Rocky Mountain winter of 1842, ice formed inside their poorly sealed cabin near what's now Colorado Springs. Despite maintaining a constant fire, they nearly died from hypothermia. The father, Jonathan Henderson, described it in his journal. We burned every stick of wood we had, and still the cold penetrated like a knife. The moisture from our breath froze on the inside walls. We huddled together, shivering, watching ice form on our blankets. 3 years later, that same family's shelter remained completely dry and comfortable, even during the worst blizzards. What changed? They mastered the science of weatherproofing. You swing your legs over the edge of the sleeping platform and grab a buckskin shirt, pulling it over your head. The fire needs tending first, survival priority 1. But that leak will need fixing before it gets worse. Creating weatherproof barriers that could exclude wind, moisture and cold while maintaining structural integrity required sophisticated understanding of material science and environmental protection systems. This wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. You stoke the fire, adding more wood. The flames rise, pushing back the morning chill. Now for that leak. You grab a small wooden ladder leaning against one wall and position it under the damp spot. Climbing up, you can see where the problem is. A small section of the roof covering has worked loose, allowing melting snow to seep through. Wall construction and chinking systems created weatherproof barriers that excluded wind and moisture while maintaining structural strength. Mountain men used log construction techniques that created tight-fitting joints, chinking materials that sealed gaps without compromising structural flexibility, and weatherproofing treatments that protected wood from moisture damage while maintaining breathability that prevented condensation problems. You know what kills most greenhorns their first winter? Sam asked you once. Not cold, not Indians, not even wolves. It's the gaps between their logs. Tiny little spaces they never noticed in summer that turn into deadly wind tunnels come January. You reach up and touch the wet spot. The water is cold against your fingers. Outside, the blizzard has calmed somewhat, but snow is still falling heavily. The temperature might be around 10 below zero, warm by Rocky Mountain winter standards. Looking at the roof construction from inside, you can appreciate the care that went into it. Split logs overlapping like shingles, with moss and clay packed between them for insulation and waterproofing. Normally it would shed water and snow perfectly, but something's shifted. Log preparation and fitting techniques created tight joints that minimized air infiltration and heat loss. Mountain men selected logs with consistent diameters, shaped joining surfaces using hand tools that created precise fits, and used traditional joinery methods that created interlocking connections capable of withstanding structural movement during temperature cycling. You remember helping build this shelter last summer. The care taken in selecting each log, stripping the bark, shaping the joints. Nothing was random. See how these logs fit together? Sam demonstrated, showing you how to notch the ends. That ain't just for looks. Each log sits tight against the one below it. Less gaps means less chinking. Less chinking means fewer leaks. He was right. Proper log fitting could reduce air infiltration by up to 80% while maintaining structural integrity under extreme loading conditions. Every percent mattered when the temperature dropped to 40 below. You climb down the ladder and move it to one side. You'll need to go outside to fix the roof properly, but first you need the right materials. From a corner of the shelter, you gather some pre-made chinking, a mixture of clay, grass and animal hair that's been soaking in a wooden bucket to keep it pliable. Chinking materials and application methods sealed gaps between logs using natural materials that provided weatherproofing while allowing controlled thermal movement. Mountain men used clay-based chinking compounds mixed with organic fibers that created flexible seals, applied chinking in multiple layers that provided redundant weatherproofing, and maintained chinking systems through regular inspection and repair, that ensured continued effectiveness. Good chinking's like good stitching, Sam told you once watching you repair a seam in your buckskin shirt. Too loose, stuff gets through. Too tight, it tears when stretched. Gotta be just right. They knew that proper chinking was essential for maintaining interior temperatures and preventing moisture infiltration. A well-chinked wall could mean the difference between a comfortable winter and a fatal one. You pull on your heaviest coat, wrap a woolen scarf around your face, and put on thick mittens. Going outside in a blizzard, even briefly, requires proper protection. You grab a wooden shovel and a small bag of repair materials. Taking a deep breath, you open the door, a thick wooden slab hung on leather hinges. Instantly, a blast of cold air rushes in, along with a swirl of snow. You step outside quickly, pulling the door shut behind you. The cold is shocking, a physical force that seems to knock the breath from your lungs. Even through your layers, you can feel it searching for any gap, any weakness. This is the cold that kills, that freezes flesh solid in minutes. Snow has drifted nearly to the roof on the windward side of your shelter, creating a natural insulation barrier. On the leeward side, where you need to work, the snow is only about 3 feet deep. You wade through it, circling to the back of the shelter. Roof systems were designed to shed snow and water, while providing adequate insulation and structural strength to withstand extreme loading conditions. Mountain men built roofs using steep angles that promoted snow shedding, waterproof barriers that prevented moisture infiltration, and insulation systems that prevented heat loss while avoiding ice dam formation that could cause structural damage. Looking up, you can see the problem. A small section of the roof covering has been lifted by the wind, creating a gap where melting snow can seep through. It's not a major breach yet, but left unattended, it could grow worse. You use the shovel to clear snow from the base of the shelter, creating a stable platform for your ladder. Then you climb up, your fingers already stiffening in the bitter cold despite the mittens. Roof construction techniques used overlapping materials that created multiple waterproof barriers while maintaining structural strength under snow loading. Mountain men used split shingles, bark sheets, and hide coverings that created layered waterproofing systems, incorporated proper drainage that prevented water accumulation, and designed roof structures that could support maximum expected snow loads while maintaining weatherproof integrity. The repair is straightforward, but must be done quickly before the cold becomes dangerous. You press the loose section back into place, then apply fresh chinking around the edges to seal it. The clay mixture is already starting to stiffen in the cold, but you work quickly, your hands moving with practiced efficiency. 3 minutes, Sam's voice echoes in your head. That's how long you got to work bare-handed in this cold before your fingers stop working. Count it out. Plan your moves. Get back inside before your hands become useless clubs. You're working with mittens, which helps, but still the cold is penetrating. You finish the repair, pack up your materials and hurry back inside, your face stinging from just those few minutes of exposure. Back in the shelter, the warmth wraps around you like an embrace. You hang your snow-covered coat near the fire to dry and warm your hands, careful not to get them too close to the flames. The rapid temperature change from extreme cold to heat can be almost as painful as the cold itself. You check the ceiling. The wet spot has stopped growing, which means your repair is holding. Given a day or two, The dampness will dry out completely thanks to the heat from the fire. This small incident highlights the constant vigilance required for mountain survival. Even a tiny breach in weatherproofing could spiral into a life-threatening situation within hours. Moisture management systems prevented condensation, ice formation, and humidity problems that could create dangerous living conditions and compromise structural integrity. Mountain men understood that moisture control required balancing ventilation needs with heat retention requirements, while preventing condensation that could freeze and create dangerous ice accumulation inside living spaces. Wet kills you 3 ways, Sam explained during your first winter. It steals your body heat, it ruins your gear, and it rots your shelter from the inside out. He wasn't exaggerating. A wet shelter could quickly become uninhabitable in winter, leaving you exposed to the elements. Death would follow shortly. You move around the interior of your shelter, checking for other signs of moisture or drafts. Near one corner you feel a slight movement of air, another small gap in the chinking that needs repair. You gather some of the chinking mixture and press it into the gap, smoothing it with your fingers. Ventilation systems provided fresh air and prevented carbon monoxide poisoning, while minimizing heat loss during extreme cold conditions. Mountain men designed ventilation systems that created controlled air exchange, prevented dangerous gas accumulation, and maintained air quality without compromising heating efficiency or creating uncomfortable drafts that increased heat loss. A shelter that don't breathe will kill you quiet in your sleep, Sam warned, but too much breathing lets all your heat escape. Gotta find the balance. Mountain men used adjustable ventilation openings that could be modified based on weather conditions and heating requirements. A small flap near the peak of the roof could be opened or closed to control airflow and prevent the buildup of deadly carbon monoxide from the fire. You check this ventilation flap now, making sure it's adjusted properly. Open enough to allow smoke and gases to escape, but not so open that it wastes heat. Like everything in mountain life, it's a careful balance. The repair work has made you hungry. From a leather pouch hanging on the wall, you take some strips of dried venison, jerky tough enough to make your jaw ache but packed with the protein and fat needed to maintain body heat in this climate. As you chew, you think about the door to your shelter. Door and window systems created secure closures that excluded weather, while providing access and natural lighting when conditions permitted. Mountain men built door systems using multiple barriers, weather sealing techniques, and emergency closure methods that could maintain weatherproof seals even during extreme wind and temperature conditions. Your door is a solid piece of split log, hung on leather hinges and secured with a wooden latch. Around its edges, strips of fur create a seal that blocks drafts. When closed, it fits so snugly that even the fiercest wind can't find a way through. A door ain't just a hole with a cover, Sam lectured when teaching you shelter construction. It's a weak point that needs reinforcing. Make it solid as a wall but able to open when needed. Mountain men used thick wooden doors with multiple sealing layers, created airlocks that prevented heat loss during entry and exit, and designed emergency closure systems that could seal openings during extreme weather events. Some larger settlements even had primitive mud rooms, small entry chambers between the outside door and the main living space. This created an airlock that prevented the rush of cold air from entering the main shelter when the outer door was opened. Your shelter is too small for such luxuries, but the principle is the same. Minimize heat loss through necessary openings, The small window, covered with that translucent animal bladder, lets in enough light to see by without creating a significant heat loss point. Some mountain men used mica sheets when available, which were more durable but harder to come by. Weatherproofing maintenance included regular inspection, preventive repairs, and seasonal preparation that maintained shelter effectiveness throughout extended winter periods. Mountain men developed maintenance schedules that addressed common failure points, repair techniques that could be performed during severe weather, and preventive measures that avoided weatherproofing failures during critical survival periods. An hour of maintenance in good weather saves a day of misery in bad, was another of Sam's frequent sayings. The old mountain man had a quote for everything, it seemed, but each one encapsulated vital survival wisdom. You finish your jerky and take a drink of cold water from a wooden cup. The morning routine of inspection and repair complete, you can now focus on other tasks. The blizzard is still blowing outside, which means gathering more firewood isn't an option yet. Instead, you'll use the time to maintain your gear, another critical survival task. From under your sleeping platform, you pull out a pair of snowshoes that need repairs. The babiche, the rawhide webbing, has stretched in places and needs tightening. Without properly functioning snowshoes, travelling through deep snow would be nearly impossible, limiting your ability to hunt, trap, or gather firewood once the storm passes. As you work on the snowshoes, the shelter grows warmer with the strengthening fire. You remove your heavy wool shirt, working in just your buckskin undershirt. Despite the raging storm and sub-zero temperatures outside, the interior of your shelter is now a comfortable 65 degrees, a testament to the effectiveness of the heating and weatherproofing systems working in concert. This comfort isn't luxury, it's survival. The ability to dry clothing, maintain dexterity in your hands, and allow minor injuries to heal all depended on creating and maintaining a habitable microclimate within your shelter. The snowshoe repairs are meticulous work, requiring focused attention and nimble fingers. You heat a bone awl in the fire, using it to punch holes in the rawhide for new lacing. The smell of heating bone mixes with the wood smoke, creating that distinctive odour of a mountain man's winter shelter. Outside, the wind's howl has diminished somewhat. The storm might be starting to break. Through the small window you can see that the snowfall has lightened, though it's still coming down steadily. You finish the snowshoe repairs and set them aside to let the rawhide dry properly. Next, you check your hunting rifle, cleaning it meticulously. In the damp air of the shelter, metal rusts quickly. A malfunctioning rifle could mean starvation once your food stores run out. As you work, you think about the weatherproofing systems that are keeping you alive. The careful log construction, the meticulously maintained chinking, the strategically designed roof with its precise angle for snow shedding, the solid door with its multiple ceiling layers, the small covered window that admits light without wasting heat, the adjustable ventilation system that prevents carbon monoxide buildup while minimizing heat loss. None of it random, all of it essential, all of it the product of generations of hard-won knowledge passed down from one mountain man to another, often at the cost of many lives. The day passes in a rhythm of maintenance tasks and fireplace tending. By late afternoon, the storm has weakened considerably. Through the window, you can see patches of clear sky appearing between the clouds. The worst has passed, at least for now. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, digging out from the fresh snow, assessing any damage to the exterior of your shelter, gathering more firewood before the next storm hits, But for today, your weatherproofing has held. Your shelter has protected you from conditions that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. As evening approaches, you add more wood to the fire, preparing for the coming night. The temperature will drop further after dark, testing your shelter's defenses once again. But you're confident in the systems you've built and maintained. You settle back onto your sleeping platform, watching the firelight dance on the log walls. Outside, the wind has died down to an occasional moan. The snowfall has stopped. The worst of the blizzard has passed. But winter in the Rocky Mountains is long and unforgiving. This storm was just one of many that will test your shelter and your survival skills before spring arrives. The emergency protocols, crisis management, and survival procedures that mountain men developed will be your guide through the challenging months ahead. You close your eyes, listening to the crackle of the fire. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, but for now your weatherproofing has held, your heating system is functioning, and you've survived another day in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The maintenance of your shelter's weatherproofing wasn't just a one-time task, but an ongoing process that required constant vigilance and immediate attention to even the smallest issues. In the mountains, a small problem ignored could quickly become a fatal one. You wake to the sound of silence. After days of howling wind, the quiet is almost unsettling. Pale blue light filters through the small window. Dawn in the mountains after a blizzard. The air in your shelter is cold, but not deadly so. The fire has burned down to embers during the night, but the thermal mass of the stone fireplace has kept the temperature from plummeting. Your first thought is about the roof repair from yesterday. You look up at the spot that was leaking. It's dry now, your quick fix having held through the night. Your second thought is more pressing. The wood pile is getting dangerously low. With the storm past, you need to venture out today to replenish your fuel supply. In the mountains, running out of firewood midwinter is a death sentence. But first, you need to restart the fire. You slide from beneath the buffalo robes, the cold air biting at your exposed face. Your moccasins wait beside the sleeping platform, and you slip them on before your feet can touch the cold dirt floor. Kneeling by the fireplace, you carefully add kindling to the remaining embers, gently blowing until flames appear. You add progressively larger pieces of wood until the fire catches properly. Only then do you turn your attention to preparing for the day ahead. The snow will be deep after the blizzard, snowshoes essential. The temperature will be brutally cold, proper layering critical. And the threat of another storm is always present, timing crucial. This day-to-day existence required constant vigilance. But what about when things went really wrong? What about when primary systems failed or conditions exceeded normal survival parameters? Martha Caldwell faced exactly that scenario during the blizzard of 1856. When their chimney collapsed under snow load and their primary heating system failed, she implemented backup heating procedures, emergency ventilation protocols, and survival techniques that kept her family alive for 6 days until the storm passed and repairs could be made. Her diary entry from that harrowing week reads, "The crash came at midnight, stones and snow pouring down where our hearth had been. The cold rushed in like a hungry wolf. I gathered the children in the corner furthest from the breach, piling every buffalo robe and blanket upon them." Then I remembered Jacob's lessons about the emergency heating. Jacob was her husband, who had learned emergency